How long has it been since you've had a new beginning? Right now it seems that everyone whom I hold dear is going through immense change, living a life different than the life they lived 18, 12, even 6 months ago. People experiencing births and deaths, sending children off to school for the first time, starting school, leaving school, changing schools, changing majors, getting their first job, retiring, changing employer, changing vocation, choosing to leave a job, being asked to leave a job, being told to leave a job, dealing with a health issue of their own, supporting someone they love through something that they are going through with their own health. Moving, leaving a home, leaving an empty nest, staying in an empty nest. The list goes on, my friends. And if you feel that none of these apply to you in the last 1 to 2 years, I'd ask you to direct your imagination back about 3 years to the time where we learned that the globe was capable of immense change and in a heartbeat. We were experiencing change, but we were clamoring for more change. And we weren't using the words new beginning, we were instead talking about a new normal. There was a period where every conversation on the street, every news article, every television spot had something to do with a new normal. We were asking ourselves at first, what is the new normal? What will the new normal look like? Are we there yet? And now I believe that we are asking ourselves, this isn't the old normal, but things are starting to feel somewhat stable, settled. Maybe we're here. Is this our new normal? And this concept of new beginnings is fascinating to me right now because I love to dig into problems. I like to think, I like to solve problems, and I come up with solutions. And I find that you need to ask the simplest questions at times to open your mind to answer the simple questions with simple solutions, and then you're in position to start thinking about things that are much more serious in nature. Spend some time with a 4-year-old. You enter the room, the first thing they do is ask you why. And depending on how forthright your question and answer period begins, it will continue all day. And you'll be driven to your wit's end, and you know that you need to answer these questions, but you don't really want to. Now, think about a group of 4-year-olds at play, and they don't know that you or any adult is in the vicinity. Pay attention. Do they ask why? You see, those children, any one of them is programmed to understand that you have lived longer, have more stories to tell, have more things to offer, and although they won't admit it in these words, you are smarter than they are. And through your openness, through your vulnerability to answer their simple and their challenging questions, I promise you, you will make them into better adults. Adults who are capable of being the one to teach the next generations that will follow. Now, if these simple questions of why are so easy for a child of 4, why is it so hard for us adults to dig up the courage to think about each and every one of these questions? That's part of why you are here right now. That is what we are working on together. We're going to figure it out. We're going to be vulnerable and get to these solutions. And the first difficult question we need to ask ourselves is, what is a new beginning? It's a perfect opportunity for you to say, that is silly. It's the most rudimentary question. I don't need to answer it. But you should. And you should spend some moments thinking of all of these questions, alone, probably out loud, so you don't gloss over anything that you think you've already covered. So what is a new beginning? What does that phrase mean? It's a very common collection of two words. And you might look at them individually and say, well, they have similar synonyms, so they must be similar. Things like start and fresh and kickoff. But by combining these two words into a simple phrase, we find something very interesting happens by the nature of the two words. New and beginning both imply that something has begun at the ground floor. But if you've already begun at the ground floor, a word earlier, how can you begin at the ground floor again? It's quite the question, honestly. New beginning does not mean start, fresh, or kick off, but something entirely different. And it's hard to figure out what it means, but it's easy to recognize. So let's start with some imagery. If I am beginning a road trip and I pack the car, get everybody involved in the car, and head to the gas station as the first stop, and when I get there I realize I don't have my wallet. So I get back in the car, head home, get the wallet. It takes but a minute, and then I'm on my way. Is that a new beginning? I don't think so, and I think you would probably agree with me. If you can't articulate why, we're probably still in agreement. Now, you could call it a lot of things. Let's try this again. Round two. Let's go at it again. And maybe, if the person who forgot something that important is in the back seat, you might have an entirely different collection of words to use. But let's take another thought. Same road trip, same packing, same cast of characters. You end up at the same gas station, and then you say, I don't want to be doing this. This destination has not appealed to me from the start. You get back in the car, overshoot your home, go off in a completely different direction. Is that a new beginning? To me, it feels more like one. But why? Well, we're going to get there. It's the same cast of characters, the same ultimate journey, the same snacks. You just have a different destination. But you're still going to have fun. Here's another. This morning, I made a peanut butter sandwich. Later in the day, I went and got the mail. New beginning? Of course not. Why? I don't quite know yet. Okay. This morning, I made a peanut butter sandwich. Later, I began making a turkey sandwich. Now, I wish that you were here with me so that I could hear your arguments for or against. Because depending on how sound that evidence was, I feel that you could give me a yes or a no, and I would be convinced. The way that I look at it, there's a few ways that it could be one or the other. Suppose you enter the room, you say, oh, are you making sandwich? Oh, peanut butter, I'm allergic. Then I'm going to stop creating the peanut butter sandwich, clean all the surfaces, throw the sandwich in the garbage. Let's be honest, I'm going to gobble down the sandwich, clean the surfaces, and start making you a turkey sandwich. Does that feel like a new beginning? To me, yes. Why? We'll figure it out. Now, I'm making a peanut butter sandwich, and at some other point you see me making a turkey sandwich. But I'm making 1,000 sandwiches to try to sell at my cafe today. New beginning? To me, no. It's part of a project called Prepare the Store for the Morning Business. And it doesn't matter at which point I begin making peanut butter sandwiches, at which point I begin making turkey sandwiches, ham sandwiches, hummus sandwiches. It doesn't really matter because I am preparing the store. You see how subtle that can be? Subtle, but very important. Now, when we talk about new beginnings happening in our lives, I often like to think in extremes in order to try to dig out the nuances or the vagaries of something that seems a little more gray. So let's go all the way back to the Middle Ages, and we'll think about the fact that there was a lot more death visible and births that became deaths and so on. So let's control for all of that. We won't use those categories, but think, if you will, of someone in the Middle Ages and how frequently they would have seen new beginnings like moving, starting a new job, starting a new school. There weren't a lot of opportunities for change. And now in our lives we see infinite amounts. In fact, all the change that you are experiencing feels heavy to you. But then, every person whom you hold dear is going through something similar. So what you begin to realize, friends, is that you have much more exposure in life to new beginnings as witnessed through the eyes of others as you do new beginnings that are going on directly to you. And that is part of our plan throughout all of this, to try to become better people through learning to care for each other more effectively. And there's no better place to start than new beginnings. So we have a rough idea of what a new beginning is. And elsewhere in this project, you're going to see a lot of materials about 8 models that I've developed that signify different types of change. Now, each individual experience, there could be a million different experiences, but I find that after about 8, I begin to realize, well, this kind is similar to this one, and this one is similar to this one over here, and so 8 seemed to be a sweet spot. So check the podcast to find out more about that. Now, when we're talking about this concept of new beginnings, and we have a rough idea of the definition we're going to use, eventually we come to realize that although different for each of us, we're all going through similar types of new beginnings, different models, if you will. And each one of them involves a new beginning, which I consider to be a point in time with no duration that signifies the changeover from a focus on a project called A, or the antecedent, and a project called B, the culmination, the journey, the adventure. You can look at both sides however you wish. But the image that you want to have is standing not on a seesaw with a stable fulcrum, but rather a plank. And your legs are on either side, and between is a barrel or a cylinder. And you've seen videos of people doing this, and it takes incredible amount of discipline to stay focused on the center. One shift of weight in either direction could send you toppling into the past or into the future. And the interesting thing about this is that it's equally easy to fall into one side, and once you have done that, it's equally hard to get back onto the center. You have to throw an immense amount of weight in the opposite direction in order to counterbalance and get back on stability. Now, why is that image helpful? And why not a standard seesaw? Because the now is not stable. The now is always moving. Right now is later in time than when I said that a second ago. We're always moving. And so you need to stay ultra focused on that now, even though it is always different. And we hear about people who are focused on the past. You're so centered in the past. And we have advice to give them. The past is the past. Don't look to the past. What happened in Vegas stays in Vegas. But it's just as dangerous, in my opinion, to stay ultra focused on our futures. And that may be a weird thing to hear, because we love to encourage people to think about the future. And obviously you need to. You need to try to have some plan in your life. But think about a time when you had a plan. Think about how meticulously you created that plan. Depending on the type of person you are, there may have been spreadsheets and task lists and categories and boards and things taped to the wall and writing on glass and all these things that people do when they're brainstorming. And you may flesh that out into step 1 through step 100 for a variety of projects. But how many times have you been living a project A, and at some point you realize that that has been washed clean and you are finding yourself in the middle of project B? You don't know how you got there, and you've never really thought about where that slash was between project A and project B, between the antecedent and what now could be the culmination, the adventure, the journey, or the disaster, depending on how you look at it. However, I want to direct your thoughts for a moment to the many ways in which your life has zigged when you thought it would zag, and something happened that you never would have guessed. Think, if you will, about someone whom you hold dear, generations ahead of you. And there's an inevitable moment at the family reunion where someone says, "Tell us how you stick together for X number of years." And what do? They begin to tell a story that has the craziest development. It always begins with, "Well, I was supposed to do blank, and instead it was raining, so I did blank." And to cut the story short, they are living happily ever after. So are we critical of that path that they took? What if they had that Gantt chart planned out, and they're not on that path right now? In a future season of the project, we're going to be talking extensively about where we are on our timeline, how we got there, and how we feel about it, how we know that we have gotten where we have gotten, and why. I expect that you will want to join in for that. But for the time being, the best that I can tell you is that if you stay focused on the now, that future will unveil itself in due time. And think, if you will, for a moment about those occasions in which you have an idea exactly the way you want it. Certain symbolic times where this might happen are at high school graduation, at college graduation, maybe at a marriage, and you say, "I want to have this person in my life, this type of car, this type of house. I want to live in this sort of place and with these sorts of people in my life." And you're very specific. These goals are micro, they're finite. But if at any point one of them were to not occur, Do you kick yourself? Let's say you decided to start something fresh yesterday and you've already fallen off. Do you kick yourself? Well, you might just be inclined to say, well, false start, I'll try it again tomorrow. But what if you began that development cycle 5 years ago, 10, maybe at age 20, age 15? Are any of those less relevant? Well, let's look at extremes in order to expose the vagaries and the nuances of something that appears more gray. Right now, I imagine you are not a unicorn princess who lives in outer space and is an animal doctor. All at the same time. Of course you're not. You wanted to be when you were 4. So are you kicking yourself? We all know the answer. But what makes that 4-year-old's aspirations any more of a figment than those aspirations of the 15-year-old, the recent high school grad, the recent college grad, or you 2 days ago? I can't answer that for you. But what I can suggest is that we might begin to focus on ideas and goals that are vaguer. I want to be the happiest that I can be. I want to have the most loving people in my life. I want to show that love to them at all times. But I set out with the goal that morning of making a peanut butter sandwich for this particular person whom I hold dear. And I didn't do it. And I gobbled up a peanut butter sandwich I wasn't even planning to eat. I feel like I have failed you. And you are going to tell me, of course you didn't. And I'm going to tell you, of course I didn't. But what if I had thought instead, this morning I am going to make sure that someone I hold dear does not go to bed hungry. I'm going to spend quality time with someone in my life today. I'm going to do that. What if your goal had been to take some time off, go back to the office 7 days later, spend time with those whom you hold dear, eat some snacks, and drive wherever you end up driving? Now, I know that that is not realistic, especially when there's others involved and there's time off from your vocation. You need to plan. And I am not saying that I am equipped to do any of this, honestly. I'm learning with you, but I have thought about it. Yeah. So think in those ways. Very different technique, but hopefully a much more positive outcome. So, all of these metrics for our goals, wanting this by now, want to have this many followers, I want to achieve this many houses that I'm going to own in the vacation house, and I'm going to have this many figures in my income. You know, friends, there's a reason that they say this phrase, work-life balance. It's because they're on opposite ends of a spectrum. Nobody talks about balancing two things that are identical or on par with each other. We balance things that are very far apart. And to preserve that plank with the barrel analogy, work and life are on your left and your right foot, and you are trying to tread somewhere in the middle. So leave the metrics at the office. Leave the metrics in the boardroom. Leave them anywhere. But in your life, let's go with vague superlatives. And I swear, friends, if you can try that, if you can live that type of a life, I honestly don't think you can go wrong. But I'm still trying to get there myself. So won't you join me? Learn, share, converse. This is a season-long adventure, and we may not get there. darn well going to start. Because the beginning of new beginnings is the start, but the actual new beginning itself is a moment in time without duration that signifies going from Project A into Project B. And you'll notice that I don't say the concluding of Project A leads to Project B. It doesn't always work that way, as we have just seen. Sometimes you have all the best intentions to get through Project A. Life has different idea. And your culmination, your adventure, your journey is more glorious than you would have ever imagined. Take care of yourself, friends. You have no other life.